Delanshan was a magnificent empire that was surrounded by the sea. The country received God's blessing and was filled with colorful flowers and luxury. Ivierno II received grace and became the reigning son of the empire. Nothing was more important to him than outward beauty. However, the emperor was not content with the splendor that surrounded him. He wished to paint the empire in even more majestic hues. The emperor wished that much prettier things had been brought to him, so they could please his eyes. When everyone started to gasp from all the luxury, a festival of national treasures was inaugurated. The emperor rejoiced greatly. Everyone brought him gifts of various beauties. But one man brought the emperor one beautiful red rose. The emperor was surprised and frantically wanted to know who had brought the rose. He didn't understand who dared bring him such a pathetic thing. He had expected some fine gift to be brought to him, not such an offering. A young youth with very beautiful eyes bowed low before the emperor. He introduced himself and said he was the one who brought the red rose. The emperor was a bit puzzled as he hadn't expected such a gift. He thought that one rose was too pathetic a gift for the emperor. The emperor felt that a mediocre flower was not good for raising the status of the empire. The young boy said she was beautiful. To him, the rose was more precious than anything else in the world. He thought the emperor would really like his offering. The emperor grinned at the young man. He was not at all interested in such a gift. With all anger, he ordered his servants to escort the young man out along with his flower. The young man was shocked by this behavior of the emperor. The servants began to lead the young man out. The emperor looked at all this and told them to wait, as he had another thought for such an unclear situation. He said that the young man had very beautiful eyes, and their radiance was very hard to look at. The emperor ordered his servants to pluck out his eyes, as he wanted to take them for himself. An altercation began between the young man and security. During the fight, they broke the flask where the rose was. The young man cried out to the emperor that he was a fool for not noticing the true beauty. He said that a man would appear who would be trapped in a black and white world in color, his life bloody. In the same year that the stranger appeared, an 8th crown prince named Rensis was born in the winter. Even the most high-minded words could not describe its beauty. The emperor looked at him and could not take his eyes away. He said that the boy was truly beautiful and the most suitable vessel for the empire. He said he would make his son a true emperor. The boy's life was so radiant that after the beach, his eyes. However, that was before he started talking. My mom would show the boy different objects and ask him what color they were. The boy is cheerful and funny, spoke only 2 colors, white and black. It was all the same to him. He saw his mom in 2 colors and didn't understand why she was so upset. He said with a smile that her hair and eyes were black in color. Everyone was whispering frantically and saying that their God had abandoned them and was angry. They were sure that the child could destroy the empire and all humans. The emperor was angry when he found out that his son couldn't see colors. He shouted that there was no such thing. The emperor was sure if he taught the boy to paint, he would be able to see different colors during his studies, and his eyes would come to normal. But no matter how much the emperor tried, the boy's world was still black and white. Eventually, the emperor dethroned the empress and sent his son to another palace. The mother hugged her son and told him that as long as he could breathe, he had to live and make his own decisions without listening to anyone. And after everything, they can meet again. A lot of time has passed since then, and until the age of 15, the boy continued to be given lessons in painting. However, he flatly refused to study. He was screaming and breaking things. Since the artist didn't help him in any way, it made him furiously angry. The artists abandoned all their attempts to help and teach the boy and ran away in fright. They were terrified at the mere thought that the boy might harm them. They were afraid of him and his curse. They were sure that he could hurt them badly, to the point of not being able to see their bright future. But there was one young lady who was not afraid of the prince. She wanted to help him and promised the prince that he would definitely be able to see colors soon. Primabelle was confident in her abilities and was determined to win on my end. However, besides the ability to distinguish colors, the boy had another desire, to see his mother again. 3 more years passed, and on his 18th birthday, the boy learned that his own mother had passed away, and because of this, he lost his sanity. The first person to die at his hand was a young artist. He was angry and yelled at her that she had promised him that if he tried hard, he could see the colors, but the nameless artist couldn't help him. He was angry with her and snapped. The prince came to his father. He told him that the only color he could see was blood red. The emperor was frightened by his son's condition. There was no way the emperor could stop him. There was only one thing left for him to do, reap the fruits of his labors. But unfortunately, it was a sad outcome for him. The prince shouted to his father that he ended up growing up according to the prediction. After saying that, he decorated the beautiful imperial palace in scarlet. The crown prince loved blood. He was able to cut out of his life all those who made him that way, and those who made no effort to restore him. A young black-haired lady sat diligently writing a short story on her computer. She knew the young boy didn't know that the end of his black and white world was coming soon. On the day the crown prince enters the throne, at the moment when he is intoxicated by emotions destroyed his family and the world, the prince meets the fateful protagonist. Thanks to her, he learned his senses and began to see colors. After that day, the prince's world changed. He was being filled with things that were previously unknown to him. The girl was very excited because she liked the plot of the novel. The young girl only had to finish her description of the main character. The girl described the main character as a young black-haired lady with bright scarlet eyes. When she wrote the intended, she was very pleased with the result, but the hard work had exhausted the girl in the extreme. She wanted to add a couple more touches and finish, but her eyelids slowly grew heavy. She didn't notice as she fell into darkness. The girl woke up to an incomprehensible scream. She didn't realize what was going on around her. I didn't realize when she'd fallen asleep. She just wanted to finish her novel. But unfortunately, something didn't go the way she wanted it to, and it was freaking her out. A young boy yelled at a young lady. He asked who she was. But, to his dismay, he realized that she was just another artist, who wanted to make it so he could see colors. He shouted at her to get away immediately. The girl looked at the young man with incomprehension and called her name. He looked at her with contempt and incomprehension. The young man was embarrassed that she dared to say his name. The girl knew that his face was exactly as in the description of the novel she was writing herself. The girl thought she was dreaming it all. The young man was so surprised by her behavior that he couldn't stand it and grabbed her arm. He pulled her right to the door. The prince shouted that he didn't need any more painting lessons. He shoved the poor girl out the door. The dazed artist stood outside the door, not realizing what was happening. The girl was scared and confused. She unequivocally felt the pain and realized that everything that was happening was not a dream. She looked in the mirror and realized she was a nameless artist. The girl didn't understand how she could be in her own affair. After all, she was living an ordinary life. The girl knew that the plot required her to die at the hands of the prince. This was supposed to be his first kill. The girl hoped that if she could organize a meeting between the prince and the protagonist, she would definitely survive. She had no choice. She knew she had to make an effort in order to stay alive. But unfortunately, other than the fact that the girl had black hair and scarlet eyes, she didn't know anything else. No age or name of the young heroine. It was a daunting task for her. And a brief description of the main one, the characters, made it very difficult to find. But she had no choice. If she wanted to survive, she had to find her. When the prince was 15 years old and his desire for rebellion reached its limit, he was consumed with anger and began to see only scarlet. Anger didn't cool down in his body. He wanted to take revenge on his abusers. The girl didn't know why exactly now she was caught up in her romance. She didn't want to die so early. So much so that I decided to get my act together and change the very plot of the novel. She wanted very much to live, and also to help the young prince so that he could avoid bloodshed. The girl felt frantically guilty for doing such a thing to the prince. The girl decided to get up the courage to go to the young prince. She knocked on the door and entered the room. She was very scared, but she knew she had to change the future. The prince saw her enter and became very angry. The prince drew his sword from its sheath and said she would not cross the threshold of his room. The frightened girl stood staring at him intently. The young prince's sword ended up near her neck. She was very scared, but she knew she had to change the future. She could see that the prince was overwhelmed with emotion. Unfortunately, she knew he hadn't met his main character yet. The young artist knew she had to find her as soon as possible. She looked at the young prince with a steady gaze. and realized that it would be very difficult to find the girl since the empire is very large and the young artist knows nothing at all about the main character. Since a large number of girls fell under the description, but she decided not to despair and do her best. The artist knew that in order for a girl to fall in love with a prince, it was necessary to dispel all the stereotypes about him. Since there were many strange and obscure rumors about the prince, she had to dispel all the myths about him and also show that they got along great. Everyone ran away from him and was afraid of him, so they didn't go near him. But the girl knew he was very good. The artist decided to play a little with the young prince and bring out his emotions. She said there was no way he was going to attack her. The prince was surprised by such a statement and asked why she was so sure of her words. The girl looked at him and said with a smile that read everything in his gaze, and it was evident that he was not at all what he appeared to be. The artist gently took the prince's hand and said that he himself knew that the talk about unfortunate artists who had suffered at his hand was just a rumor. She saw him trying fiercely to defend himself. An interesting thought occurred to her, or rather a way to solve all her problems. She said she was very upset, and that's why she still hadn't introduced herself. The girl said her name was Primabelle, and she would teach him painting. She also looked at him fondly and asked him to put away the dangerous sword and suggested he start class. She knew that he needed to be treated with warmth and care so that he could recover and begin to live a full and colorful life. Primabelle said she came to him to help him. She knew that in order for the fated beauty herself to find Ren, she needed to interrupt him into the most popular man in the empire. But also, she genuinely wanted to help him and fix his hard fate. The artist said she would prove it to everyone and make sure he could see colors, and said he could call her Prim. She knew she'd do anything to make sure he could enjoy life to the fullest. He looked up at her, and a sweet smile broke through the frown on his face. The artist was glad he smiled at her. She ran up to him at full speed. The prince was surprised at this reaction from the young lady. He looked at her and said she was wrong. He was sure she was incapable of distinguishing a chuckle from a smile. Ren said he was taken aback by her words. He thought she was talking some kind of nonsense. Prim noticed that he had turned abruptly gray. Ren looked at her and wondered if she was going to rehash again about how he would be able to see colors if he drew hard. He hoped not to hear such a thing again, since he was uncomfortable hearing the same thing and not seeing the effect. The girl said that they would not hold lessons until the crown prince wanted to do so himself. She knew he didn't enjoy the lessons, and even more so, she knew there was no effect from them. Prim knew where to focus her attention. Ren was surprised. Prim said he used to draw all the time, but nothing good came out of the idea. Prim said there was another way, after which he would be able to see colors. Ren was shocked. He wanted to know if there was definitely another way, and if she was definitely capable of healing his eyes. The girl faltered, but knew he was the main character after all, and she could tell him a little about his fate. The artist said it was very simple, and she would help him. She was sure they would only succeed if he followed her instructions. She said everything with a pure and sincere smile. The prince looked at her and said he understood. Ren said with anger in his voice that she was a fraud. The girl was in shock. She thought and hoped he would accept her help. The principal was angry, he said, though he was sent to another palace. However, he wasn't foolish enough to trust the promises of some con artist. He turned to leave, and lastly said he didn't want to hear from her anymore. So much for asking you to leave the palace. He told her to stay out of his sight. The girl had no intention of staying just like that. She grabbed his hand and pulled him to her. She said she was telling the plain truth and would not change her intentions in any way. She wanted to go all the way with him and change his future. He was angry with her and told her to leave. Since the principal only saw the color scarlet, when he remembered his father, he was sickened by the color. He yelled for her to leave as her hair reminded him of blood. The girl was confused. She was confused by the prince's words. She knew that only one nanny knew that he could see the color red. She thought that maybe they could bond, and later he would share his secret with her. The principal came close to the young artist and said if she bothered him or caught his eye, he would kill her. He didn't want to see her, and he was angry. He intended to fulfill all that he had said. She knew his words were not empty words, and it made her very scared. The last prince headed for the door. He wanted to leave since the girl wouldn't leave on her own. The young artist was shocked at what was happening. He said that if she wanted to keep her life, she should leave the castle immediately. He also added that he will never paint again. He left, slammed the door behind him, and she yelled after him. Since she didn't frantically want to know what color her hair was, she wanted to hear the truth from him, but he left without answering her. The girl knew that the prince was most unceremonious, and that he didn't even let her get a word in edgewise in their brief dialogue. She knew she couldn't stay that easily, and she couldn't allow that possibility. She's the one who came up with it anyway. She knew she had to deal with this alone now. The girl knew it was just the first day, and things would gradually get better. She was determined to come again tomorrow. The next day the girl came to the prince. She sat under the door waiting for him to come. She wasn't going to listen to him, and she was frantic to make things right. The girl sat and wrote down her ideas in her notebook, as she knew his nanny was a good option for him to be able to see colors again. She wanted to use it to get through to him. The nanny was the only person to the prince who didn't believe in the prophecy. She regarded him with tenderness and warmth. Nanny loved the young prince as her grandson. She more than anyone else wanted the young man to see all the colors and fully enjoy the beautiful world. The girl went to the prince's nanny and asked her to attend the lesson. The nanny wasn't thrilled about this and didn't know what she could do to help. But the girl had no intention of giving up and wanted the woman to help her. Prim, with all gentleness and courtesy, asked the nanny to help her. She believed that with her help, she would reach her goal faster. The artist was in full confidence that if the nanny was near the young prince, he would study harder. Since she wanted to do everything so he could see different colors with his beautiful eyes. She was frantic to correct his fate. The ladies went into the prince's room. The young artist greeted the prince with a cheerful smile. He was surprised. The prince hadn't expected to see them, much less the two of them. He realized that there was a plot against him behind their arrival. The young prince looked at them and told his nanny that his eyes were very sore. He said he could only see the dark silhouette of her face, and they wouldn't be able to start class. Prim knew this was just another ploy by the prince to avoid starting the lesson. The nanny was taken aback. She didn't want the prince to worry. The artist looked at the prince and said with a smirk, her eyes began to hurt very suddenly. But the nanny was determined to get the girl. She said there would be no lesson today, as the prince was not feeling well. Prim realized that the mission involving the babysitter had failed, and there was nothing she could do to help her, as she is very attached to him and will listen to him in everything. Marianne took Prim from the room. On the third day, the artist came to the prince and told him that she had brought him some very exciting books as well as delicious desserts. She hoped she could get along with him that way. Prim knew he was very fond of books and desserts, since he had written about it herself. She thought he would be lenient with her. She hoped they could bond that way. The young prince said she seemed to want him dead. The girl didn't understand what that was saying, but he said he was allergic to peaches. Prim was very confused, as no one had told her anything and it was not mentioned anywhere in the book. She said we could put dessert aside for later and do the books. The girl knew she had to do something quickly, so he couldn't kick her out. She proceeded to read the book. Prim started reading to him, and as she read, she realized that the book was for adults. She was a little confused as she didn't know this would happen to her. She picked up the first book she could find and didn't count on it being for the older contingent. The young prince looked at her obliquely. The young girl knew she had to find a way out of the situation quickly. She said that at that age, he should already be learning different things since he should be meeting his sweetheart soon. The girl knew the more she started talking, the more the situation became more complicated. He looked at her in surprise and told her in a quiet voice to take the book and leave quickly. He didn't want to see her again. On the fourth day, the girl sat alone, for the prince would not speak to her, and he was not in the room. She sat there in despair, and realized that he didn't want to talk to her at all, but she had no intention of giving up and wanted to try again. Prim sat waiting for the prince, reading books together where no one ever went in. She hoped he would come to her soon. It was very late, but she didn't want to leave as she hoped to talk to him. The nanny peeked into the room. Prim had hoped it would be a prince, but unfortunately, it was only a nanny. Nanny said that the crown prince should be coming soon. The nanny shared her troubling thoughts. She said that the prince is very nice, but he doesn't like to get close to people as they only hurt him. Nanny pitied Prim and comforted her, for she was sorry the young girl had not succeeded. The nanny was very worried about the crown prince. She wanted to see a smile on the young boy's face at least once in a while. If she saw it, she'd be very happy. The young girl stood frustrated and looked at the nanny. She genuinely wanted to help him so she could smile in peace. The nanny was upset, as the prince had also left the castle as early as the afternoon. Prim heard everything from the nanny and got very worried. Nanny knew that the young man had left the castle and had not taken the lantern with him. Nanny knew that when it was dark, he could see much worse. She paced around the room and was very nervous about the crown prince. She was worried that something might happen to him. The artist forgot for a second that the young prince could not see well in the dark. She hesitated, not knowing what to do. The dumbfounded girl sat wondering what would happen to the young prince. She knew she couldn't let it go. Prim knew she absolutely had to help him, as she felt responsible for everything that had happened to him. The young prince saw the world only in black and white, and as night fell, he was almost blind. At night, he loses the only thing he is allowed in this world, that is light, and at night, he cannot navigate. Night was the most dangerous thing in his life. The young artist was worried that something might happen to the prince. She knew she couldn't leave it like this. Prim wanted to leave the castle quickly and go in search of him. The artist went in search of young Ren after all. She screamed frantically and called out for the prince to come to her. She kept berating herself for creating such a world for him. Prim saw the light from afar. She realized that the young prince was most likely in that spot. She hastily ran to the light. She walked closer and saw Ren lying on the ground. She also saw several young men near him. She saw a young man with golden hair with a glimpse of red and a sly smile on his face. She realized who it could be. He was the 6th crown prince of the empire. Ever since he was a child, the emperor had been very indulgent to the young prince, for he was the most handsome of all his heirs. But after the birth of Crown Prince Rensis, everything changed dramatically, as all the emperor's attention was focused on the young boy, and his 6th heir moved into the background and soon disappeared from view altogether. The 6th prince's anger did not subside even after the boy left the palace because of his curse. He was furious that he was given less attention, and sometimes not even noticed at all, because to the emperor, Rensis remained the most beautiful and handsome of all the heirs. Daves told one of his companions to hit him, as he frantically wanted to check out all the rumors the artists were spreading. He knew that if he touched the young man, he could be crippled for life, and he wanted to know if it was true or not. The young man hesitated and didn't know what to do, as he didn't want to test all the rumors on himself, but he had no choice. The young man walked up to the young Rensis and pretended to punch him. After he touched it, he frantically started screaming that his eyes hurt, and he couldn't see anything else. He fell to the ground and kept screaming. Deefs looked at him and said that he made a very bad actor, and said that he needed help to make the whole situation more believable. Deefs took his bow and aimed at the young man. He aimed right at his eye. The young man was very scared, but couldn't do anything about it. Deifs shot him in the eye with an arrow. The young boy screamed furiously in pain. An arrow pierced his eye. He was in unbearable pain. The crown prince looked up through the shroud of darkness and was horrified at what was happening. The young man shouted frantically. The 6th principal walked over to him and took the arrow from his eye. He grinned and said, his response more believable now. The 6th prince looked at him and said that because of the curse he would not be able to see and would be crippled for life, and he could not allow that, and as a true master he must take pity on him. Daves raised his sword and swung it over the servant. He killed him with one swing of his sword. Daves had done away with the young companion, and no more cries for help were heard. As in an instant, everything stopped. The prince went up to his brother and told him to remember for life that he was the most disgusting of the imperial family's children. The remaining young men began beating poor Rensis. Unfortunately, he couldn't do anything about it. The artist knew she had to help him and fix the whole situation. She ran up and got between him and his abusers. She screamed frantically for them to leave him alone. The 6th prince was confused. He didn't understand who this young lady was or why she was so fiercely protective of him. Prim clung to her new friend with a deadening grip. The artist was confused, and so much so that she was able to ask the prince why he was giving himself a hard time and why he wasn't defending himself. Deef stood and scoffed at the young couple. He said with a smirk, seeing that the artist's lessons had not gone in vain. Ren wasn't going to put up with the bullying. He glared at his older brother with a furious look. Ren walked up to him and punched him. The man fell down and asked apprehensively what he was doing. He was frantically yelling that Ren was crazy. It was confusing to him that Ren could hit him. The artist said Ren sees everything. Deefs looked on with wonder, and Dread asked if he could actually see. The artist pointed to her hair and asked Ren what color he saw. The young prince hesitated, not knowing what to answer. He couldn't understand how she knew he could see scarlet. The girl asked him insistently, pointing to her hair, what color he saw. The prince looked at her and said her hair was red in color. The sixth prince was distraught. He couldn't believe that the young man was starting to see colors. He knew he couldn't stay alone with them any longer, so he decided to leave quickly. The young men mounted their horses and quickly sped off into the distance. The prince and the artist stood looking after them. Prim asked Prince if he was okay. The prince looked at her in confusion and said he hadn't told anyone but Marianne that he could see the color red. He asked her how she knew his secret. The artist didn't know how to answer him or how to explain the whole situation. She knew she needed to quickly, something to answer. He grabbed her hand, waiting for an answer to his question. The artist couldn't help herself and fell. The prince frantically wanted to know who she really was. He leaned close to her and told her that if she didn't tell him the truth, he would mercifully kill her now. The girl was shocked and confused. She didn't know what to do, but she thought for a minute and realized that she wouldn't be able to get out of the situation normally. She said Marianne told her about his secret. The girl mentally apologized to the elderly nanny. The girl looked at the young prince and said she wanted to know more and asked Marianne to reveal his secret. She frantically screamed that the woman wasn't guilty of anything and it was all her fault. The young man looked at the young beauty with bewilderment. The young artist looked at the prince with frightened eyes and said that she only wanted to help him. She also added that if she hadn't interfered in their altercation today, he would have had to endure bullying and beatings, and she couldn't let that happen. The prince looked at her with pity in his eyes and sadness. He said that next time she must never get involved in such a fight, or he would kill her on the spot. She agreed with him. Prim said he needed to give her a hand, since it is already very dark and he will have a hard time walking. The nanny and all the servants were frantically shouting and searching for the young prince. They finally saw them, and she calmed down. The nanny told the prince that she was very worried about him since he didn't even have a flashlight with him. She saw the young artist and asked if she was okay. The artist said she was fine. She just accidentally stumbled and fell. Prim said that first she wanted the prince's wounds treated. Marianne gave the ointment, and that wanted the prince's wounds treated. Ren told Prim to go away and do nothing. The girl shouted furiously that she would not leave and would help him. Ren was furious and didn't want her to stay with him. He started yelling at her, but she pretended her nose hurt and she couldn't leave. He smiled at her. He was amused by her words and ridiculous antics. The artist knew she was seeing all the progress as no one had been able to stand up for him before. She knew that everyone was simply blind and afraid of him. The artist moved over to him and began treating his wounds. The prince was embarrassed by this closeness and told her to move away from him and walk away. The girl yelled that she wouldn't leave as he had more wounds to treat. He looked at her and said she needed to take care of her face first. Prim yelled that she wasn't leaving as he still had a wound on his arm and she needed to treat it. He took the ointment and said he would do it all himself, but she yelled at him to give her the ointment and she would do it all. When they were fighting, she saw that there were scars and cuts on his body. She was in shock. Ren looked at her and said he had done this to himself. He said he covered himself in blood. The girl knew that the young man himself was trying to prevent the prediction. He was constantly trying to hide and have no contact with other people. She knew it was all her fault. He couldn't believe the prophecy and was doing himself irreparable harm. He had only seen one color and knew he might see more in the future. He hoped the prediction wouldn't come true. The girl was shocked by everything. She realized it was her fault. She needed to fix it. She wanted the prince to be able to see all the colors that were available in their beautiful world. She knew she shouldn't back down. She wanted to right her wrong and help the innocent boy. The artist apologized to the young prince and said she would help him and he would be able to see colors. He looked at her and asked how she could help him. Since he knew he was exiled to the palace because of his inability to see colors, he looked at her intently and said that he lived and breathed, but still remained the very first threat to the empire. The artist said she would definitely help him, but he had to trust her. He looked at her and said he would accept her help. But if she doesn't help him, she'll be the first to die by his hand. The artist agreed and said she would help in any way she could and wouldn't die. She looked at him with a smile and told him to trust her, and she would definitely help him. He loved that she wanted to help him and wasn't burdened with nice, warm feelings. After everything, his eyes started hurting. He didn't know what it was related to. The next day, Prim thought about everything that had happened. She knew she had done the right thing by letting the boy hit her yesterday. By doing so, she had gotten very close to the prince. On her way to the prince, she saw the maid and greeted her with a smile, and asked her what the book in her hands was. The maid said she looked in one of the libraries and picked up a book. The girl looked at it and asked if by chance it was a love book. Prim looked at her and said that she probably couldn't talk to her lover and wanted to read a book. The maid looked at her and asked with a smile how she knew. The girl knew she was a pro in love matters and could help her. The maid begged Prim to help her. Prim looked at her and said it was very confidential information, but she wanted to help the maid to find her happiness. Prim knew that in the real world, she had had some very deplorable experiences in relationships. But because she wrote love novels, she knew all about love and relationships. She also knew she had a lot of free time and could help someone in such a difficult situation. Prim looked at the girl and said she couldn't refuse her since she was asking so much. She looked at her with a smile and asked the girl to tell her what was really troubling and saddening her. The prince was in the room reading a book, but a while later, his silence was broken by a noise outside the door. He decided to look out and see what really happened there, as he could hear talking and laughter. He was confused and wanted to see who was disturbing his peace. Prim was handing out advice to the maids. The girls were a bit confused as they didn't know if they should really do this. They were afraid and didn't know what to do, or if it was okay to be the first to confess their feelings for a man. Prim assured them that everything is fine and they need to tell the truth in their other half as their future depends on it. The prince looked out and looked at all that was going on, smiled at her, and told her that he could see she had quite a bit of free time on her hands since she was standing around dispensing advice. The girl turned around and said with a smile that she was giving out love advice to girls because she had learned a lot of useful information from the books and could now help someone else. He looked at her and said he hadn't asked her such details. Prim looked at him with a hard stare and asked where he came from with a smile. The prince said from the library. The maids were whispering and knew it was about to get very noisy. Prim decided to take his hand and told him that they had class today and needed to hurry. The maids were shocked and couldn't believe their eyes. They realized that Prim was a master of her craft after all, since she made even the prince listen to her. Prim looked at the prince and said that she had met Marianne on her way to see him, and she had asked her how he was feeling. The prince looked at her as he recognized that she had only asked him to trust her, but now she was making a lot of noise and wouldn't stop talking. He didn't like it all. He looked at her angrily. He started to tell her to go away. The girl was not confused and pretended to have a sore nose as she had been hit very hard last time, and she said she's probably about to bleed again. She looked at him with a smile and asked if the imperial palace could ask for compensation for the damage. The prince looked at her and got even angrier. He realized she was just manipulating him. Prim decided to change the subject and asked him what he was reading to the library and said he could recommend some interesting book. She asked him if there was any book that collected all the legends of the empire. As she loved to read very much, and a book like this would suit her, the prince looked at her and gave her a book. The girl was very happy that he shared the book with her. She asked if he was really giving her his book to read. The prince said he was giving her a book as he wanted her to stop making noise. The girl thanked the young man for the book and said she would definitely look it up and read it. She looked up the title and was horrified, as the book was about the relationship between blood and monarchy. Prim realized she needed to look for some more books, less horrible than what she had been given. The girl reviewed all the books, and she didn't like the contents as they were very gloomy. She said it wouldn't work, and she needed to find something lighter. The prince looked at her and said he didn't care what she wanted, and he would read what he liked. Prim looked at him and said that all the rumors the artist had spread about the prince were lies, and to that she was proof. He looked, but not, and asked why she was so sure. Prim said with a smile she held his hand and she was fine, so he can make sure of that. The prince realized that the girl was talking another nonsense. She said everyone should see how close they've gotten. And after that, everyone will start reaching out to him. She said she thought all the stuff about him not being allowed to get close to anyone was just a lie, because she was fine. He looked at her and wondered if they really should get closer. The girl looked at him and told him that they needed to get closer to each other for things to go according to plan. He realized it was just idle chatter and had no intention of listening to her anymore. He looked at her and said in a harsh tone that he did not intend to listen to her ugly lies anymore, so he asked her to move out of the way as he wanted to get away from her. The girl asked with a smile where he wanted to go, since she had no intention of letting him go just like that. She knew she had to gain her favorite ways to win his favor. The young girl said she would go along with him, but he said he didn't want to see her. The girl resisted with all her might. She was frantic to go with him. But the prince said it was an order, and she must obey it without fail. He left, and she yelled after him that it wasn't fair to her. The girl was left all alone in the room. She realized that the prince had an unbearable temper. The prince and the nanny were in the room. The prince looked out the window and saw the young artist. The babysitter said she was giving out advice to people. The prince was a bit puzzled, as the girl was simply wasting her time. His nanny assured him that the girl was very nice and helped people, and some even called her a seer, as she has already created more than 10 young couples. The nanny told the young man that he had changed a great deal since the artist had come and was more peaceful. The young prince pondered a little over his nanny's words. He looked out the window and didn't realize how long this was going to go on. They saw a young beauty surrounded by maids. Looking out the window, he noticed that the girl's dress had changed color, and a strange color appeared on his face. He stared intently and didn't understand what color her dress was, since it was the first time he had seen it. He stared intently and was confused, for it didn't look like red. He knew the blood was red, and this color was much lighter than blood. A moment later, he could no longer see anything, and this made him very upset, as he wanted to fully enjoy the colorful world. The prince was confused. He didn't realize if he had imagined it or if it was real. All the maids frantically wanted the young mistress to help with advice. She was simply not given a go. One of the girls shouted that she urgently needed advice and help from a young artist. She frantically begged for the one to help her. Prim in turn said that she would definitely help her and would come to see her tomorrow. The girl entered the prince's room. She greeted him politely and apologized for being late. The artist said that it seems that the advice she has been giving out seems to have helped people a lot, and now they simply don't give her a pass and wish she would help them further with advice. The prince said she was busy doing useless work. The girl was surprised and said that the work is not useless at all, as it helped many people to find their soulmate, and other people's romantic stories are quite interesting. She knew that if she could get the young, cold prince to talk, he would tell her what kind of girls he liked. The artist stepped closer to her master and asked if he had a certain type. She knew that if she knew what kind of girl he liked, she could easily find a main character for him. He looked at her and said he didn't have one. She looked at him and told him with a smile not to worry, and she would find him his true destiny and the most beautiful girl in the whole world. She called him a wild beast. Ren was very surprised and angry. So much so that he told her not to dare address him like that anymore, and added that he didn't need to look for anyone, so she had nothing to worry about. The girl said that she will find his destiny all his life. Also added that she has the ability to see the future, and everyone around calls her a seer. He looked at her and said she was talking complete nonsense. Prim looked at him and said it might be nonsense, but he was still interested in hearing it. She said she could also read minds, but later added that she was joking. He said she could try to read his mind. She took his hand and, looking at him, told him how he felt. She looked at it and said he thought she was really annoying. The prince said she was lying. She was surprised and said it was true, but the prince said it was the opposite. Prim looked at him and gave him a perplexed look and said that their waves were not converging today. The artist looked at him and said that their heart waves were not converging today. So, that she will try tomorrow, also added that she has to leave to solve a case and she will be back soon. And tomorrow, they're sure to pick up where they left off. The girl was very happy and said that today they were finally able to talk. As she left him, she wished him good night and told him she would be sure to come early tomorrow. The prince looked after her and did not understand why she left him contentedly. The next day, the artist flew into the room and saw the prince. The prince was shocked and asked why she didn't even knock. The girl said she was in a great hurry to see him, for the cherry blossoms were blooming, and she was anxious to show him all the beauty. She frantically begged him to come with her. She pointed her finger at the tree and said that if they didn't go now, they wouldn't see them again. She knew he could only see the color red because of his anger. Prim wished she could show him all the colors. The girl wanted to arouse his feelings other than anger and by all means get results. He looked at her and said she was standing under a tree and could widow admire them, and he didn't feel like going. She grinned at him and said he was watching her after all. He got angry and said he wasn't observing, just a passing glimpse. The girl said that since he was up already, they could safely go for a walk and look at the flowers. The artist led the young gentleman's friend and said that since they had already gone out for a walk, they could have a picnic as well. The prince was puzzled, but did not want a walk or a picnic. As they walked towards them, the servants came up. They were shocked that the girl was holding the hand of a young prince, and they were walking together. The servants looked at him with a frightened look. The prince did not like to go out because of such looks and reproaches in his direction. He was disgusted with the whole thing. He wanted to leave this place as soon as possible. Prim rushed to him and comforted him. She didn't want him to leave and not see all the beauty. The others stood watching her touch the prince. They were shocked and said that most likely all the rumors were lies, as the girl was fine and nothing was going on. Prim said he should look at the flowers after all, and showed him the flowers that were on the cherry tree. She was glad he would be able to see them after all. She showed them to him with a smile and was very pleased. He looked at her and was frustrated as he saw nothing but his black and white world. But suddenly, the flowers on her head froze. He walked closer to her and saw that they had changed color. He touched the girl and the flowers and asked gently what color they were. The girl said in a trembling voice that the flowers were pink in color. He looked at her and realized there was a distinct tinge of pink on her face. He looked up at the tree and saw the tree studded with pink flowers. He was very happy to see such beauty and to be able to see a new color. The girl was very pleased and asked if he liked the flowers. He wanted to smile at her and tell it like it was, but he knew she'd hit on him later. He didn't want to listen to her extra talk and said he needed to get back to the castle. He turned and walked away. The girl looked at him confused. The next morning, the prince awoke and fondly recalled their time together. Prim entered the young prince's room. He was a little puzzled and said that it was very early, and why did she even come? The girl said that she should always be by his side even such a morning. He looked at her and said with a smile that was just shameless. He didn't understand why he smiled and hurried to rectify the situation. The prince said her noise made him lose sleep. Prim said then it was time to get up. He looked at her and asked if she had eaten. The girl hesitated, not realizing what was happening. The prince said if she hadn't had breakfast yet, they could have breakfast together. Staring intently at the young prince, she didn't understand what had happened or why. He changed his attitude toward her dramatically. Prim was overjoyed and hoped he would change and be a little softer. She genuinely wanted to help him, and he looked at her and asked why she was gobbling me up. She quickly began her meal. The prince looked at her and said that she seemed to have a hobby of sneaking glances at other people, and that's what she did the first time they met. Prim said that she was very glad that he offered to take her out to breakfast together, as she hadn't expected that from him. While Prim was eating, she asked about the sixth prince. Ren looked at her and said that he hadn't heard from him, and he wouldn't make a fuss as it would only hurt him. Ren said that the prince knows that he can see colors because of her, and he also knows that if Ren goes back to the castle, his position will change a lot, and he couldn't let that happen and hasn't said anything to anyone yet. Ren assured Prim that she had nothing to worry about and everything would be fine. The prince looked at her and asked what her plan was. The artist said with a smile on her face that he should learn to distinguish colors after he could see them. And then surely the prophecy would end. She was sure that after he saw the man who was destined for him by fate, he would be able to see colors. Prim said that it will be very hard for him to find the right person, as there are groundless rumors surrounding him, but she will help him do it, as she will first dispel all the bad rumors that are about him, and later help him find his true destiny. The prince was confused. He asked what she meant by the words true destiny. The girl said it was love, of course, and asked him if he met his true love, what he would say to her the first time they met. The young prince said he wouldn't say anything. The girl said he needed to greet the young lady politely first, and then later casually continue the conversation. She began to tell him what he needed to do and how he needed to do it. He looked at her and said it was a lot of trouble for him. He asked with a smile if he was sure he needed to do all this. The girl said with a smile that he needed to do whatever she said. She also said that since they were eating together, they could practice. The principal was a little surprised and asked her what she wanted. The girl said he should talk to her, as he had a true destiny. Prim began to make casual conversation. She said that she loves desserts and that she gobbled up some really good strawberry cake yesterday, which was delicious. He asked her with a smile, asking her to stop talking. The girl said that it is very unseemly to interrupt the interlocutor, and these are obvious things. She wouldn't listen to him and started further conversation about the cake. She praised the dessert and said it was delicious. He looked at her and saw a new color in her cheeks. Prim looked at him with a smile and said they could have dessert together next time. The young prince said his eyes hurt and he needed to leave. He left her, and she sat staring after him, confused. Prim thought he was very impatient. The young artist was approached by her friend and greeted her. He said he found the place where young noble ladies gather. Prim was overjoyed and thanked him frantically. She knew she had a chance to find the prince's beloved. The young man said they might not be able to get to them in time to see them today, so they needed to hurry if she wanted to see them. Prim knew that a new lesson with the prince was about to begin, but she also thought that since he'd left her so quickly, he certainly wouldn't want to see her today. She hoped she could see the young noble ladies and find him a companion. So much so that she decided to go to meet them immediately. The maid told the prince that Prim had left immediately. He was very upset as he wanted to have the dessert with her that she had been praising so much. He sat there thinking that he didn't care that she had gone somewhere else. A moment later, he realized that she wasn't coming to his class today. The man brought her on her artist to the meeting place for young noble ladies. She was surprised, but he said that was where they would be. The girl hoped she could find a young beauty for the prince. She decided to observe from the sidelines and not interfere in any way. She frantically wanted to find the young prince's fate. Prim knocked on the door, hoping she could make her plan a reality. The girl walked in to the young ladies and saw a lot of dressed-up young ladies. They were having casual conversations. Prim listened to them and was shocked at what they were saying. The artist was overjoyed at being able to attend their tea party. Secretly, if she had to enter into conversation with them, she would not be able to stand it. She looked at all the girls in search from the main character. She hoped she could meet her in a place like this. Prim's gaze caught and considered each of the girls present. She was shocked at what she saw, as there were several girls and each fit the description, but she looked closely and saw that only one fit the full description of the main character. The girls struck up a casual conversation about painting. As Prim came closer, she listened and realized that one of the candidates for their main character was up to something. She was acting very suspicious. Since it was soon to be the princess's birthday, most of the ladies present received an invitation, except for one young lady. The girl looked at the young lady who didn't get the invitation, and with a smirk, she told her not to get upset, and maybe she would still get an invitation, or it hadn't gotten to her yet. The girl hesitated, not knowing what to say. She moved closer to her and said that Her Majesty had probably just forgotten about the invitation, or it just hadn't gotten through yet. She calmed down and said she needed to wait a little longer. The girl said she is a painter and has recently started to try painting with a new technique. She also added that if the young lady listens to her and takes into account all her instructions, she will definitely be noticed and will repeatedly send invitations to different events. The young artist looked at the whole situation and realized that fate had given her very obvious clues, and she could not miss such a chance. She decided to immediately follow all the clues and communicate with the fate and true love of the prince. Prim walked over to the young lady and spilled tea on her. The girl was surprised. Prim began to apologize quickly. She was at a loss and didn't know what to do. The girl said she was fine, she had nothing to worry about. Prim looked at her intently and said that the girl must be very worried about her father. The bewildered young lady looked bewildered at Prim. The artiste said he was pressuring her a lot about her choice of a husband candidate. As the young lady was showing her friends the painting, Prim saw the trace of the ring on her finger. She realized that the girl didn't want the young ladies to see her with her future husband. The confused girl asked how she knew all the information. Prim moved closer to the young beauty and said that when they ran into each other, she looked into her soul and saw the image of her father. She said he was pushing her very hard. Prim said her father had black hair and scarlet eyes. The girl said in a trembling voice that she was right. Prim gave the girl's true name. The young lady was shocked at such details. She asked how she could know all this. Prim looked at her and said that she has a very strong poison lodged in her soul, and because of her stubborn nature, she wants to stifle the emptiness inside her. Prim said that the girl did not like the candidate her father had chosen as her husband, but she had a very effective way to help her distance herself from the man she hated. The girl was overjoyed and asked her to share the way she frantically wanted to know everything. Prim said that such a bond was very difficult to break, as everything was sky-high. The girl stepped closer and frantically excused the young lady to tell all so that she could correct her fate. Prim really wanted to teach all the girls a lesson, specifically the young lady who was behaving very unbecomingly towards the poor girl. She decided to have a little fun and told her to put her hand on her chest and confess all the misdeeds and bad deeds she had done today. The girl started to apologize to the young lady in one voice as they were behaving very ugly towards her. They wished that everything would stop and heaven would send them a true destiny, given only once. Prim was very pleased with the result. She approached the young girl with a smile. The young lady noticed that Prim had violet eyes and was very surprised, greeted the young lady politely. The girl looked at the mysterious red-haired girl and saw she had different eyes. They were black. She thought she must have just been dreaming. Prim apologized to the girl for her so-not-for-me appearance and said that she saw the other girls mocking her and wanted to rectify the situation. The young girl was very surprised to have someone help her from outside. She thanked the young savior with a smile on her face. Prim looked at her and realized that this was the girl who should be with the prince. The young black-haired beauty thanked her savior once more and said that she was very grateful to her and was very glad that the girls wouldn't be bothering her anymore. Prim looked at the girl and asked if she believed in fate. The young lady was confused and asked her if she was a witch by any chance. Prim said that if she were a witch, she would have destroyed the girls, but as it was just a bit of fun. Prim wanted to know about Her Highness's birthday. The young lady began to tell her that every year when the summer season turns to fall comes the birthday of the 7th princess. Prim didn't let the young lady finish her sentence and said she wanted to see her painting. The girl was puzzled and didn't understand why she was looking at paintings. Prim said she herself came from far away and didn't know what style they used in the empire, so much so that she would like to see paintings by other artists. Prim said with a smile that if it wasn't too much trouble for the girl, she'd love to see her painting. The young lady said that in her opinion, it would be better if Prim looked at other more expensive paintings. Since she's not very good at painting, but still, she decided to show her the painting. Prim saw the painting as well and was very surprised at its beauty. Prim said she looked out of her head after everything to introduce herself. Prim said with a smile that she was an artist and added that she had not arrived in the empire that long ago and didn't know much about painting in these parts. She'd be very happy to have someone to help her settle in a new place. Prim said that she didn't have a single person here to talk to about everything, and she would love it if someone could help her find out more information about the empire. Prim's new friend said she would help her settle in. The artist smilingly approached her, took her hand, and fondly told her to be sure to take care of her. I made an appointment to see a new friend. She said it would be nice if they met 3 times a week at the tea house. The black-haired beauty agreed with her. Alina said she didn't feel comfortable talking about it, but it was the first time in her life she had ever made an appointment with someone, and she was very happy that she finally had a friend. Prim looked at her and said with a smile that she was very happy to meet her too. Prim was very happy to have found the main character and dreamed of the first meeting between the prince and the girl. She knew they loved each other at first sight. She was frantic to make it work. Prim knew it was necessary for them to meet. She knew she had a lot of work to do as she had to think of how to organize their meeting. Prim knocked on the prince's door, but he didn't answer. She flew into the room like a whirlwind. With astonishment, the young man threw the book down. He didn't understand what was happening. Prim stepped closer to him and asked if he was okay, and if he was hurt. The prince said he was fine. Prim apologized for coming so suddenly and also apologized for leaving today and not telling him anything. The prince looked at her and said she gave off a coffee scent. Primabelle looked at him and said that she really liked coffee and drank it often. She noticed he was holding a book and asked what he was reading. The prince told her to stay back and leave soon if she didn't have anything important for him. Prim suddenly remembered what she had heard from the maids before. They whispered frantically and said that there were some very strange books in the castle that if you read them, you might forget the contents. Prim decided to find out what the book he was holding was. She came closer and closer smiling, asking him to show him the book, or at least tell him the title. The prince was shocked and told her to leave immediately. Prim said she was joking and she didn't see anything, so he doesn't have to worry. The girl said she had just stopped by to see him, and now she would be on her way out. She said goodnight to him and told him she would be sure to come back tomorrow. He looked at her and asked with a tender look if she was going anywhere tomorrow. Prim said they would definitely meet tomorrow, and she wasn't going anywhere, so they can spend. Prim looked at him and didn't understand why he was so angry. She asked if the sixth prince had come to see him. Ren said he came by, but it was nothing like that. He said she shouldn't care about that and could leave already. Prim was in shock and didn't realize what had happened. She said that in that case she was leaving and wished him good night, calling him a wild beast. He stared bewildered at the door. The prince opened the book and stared at it. He wanted to read on, but his thoughts were on Prim. He remembered the warm moments with her. His heart fluttered. He didn't understand what was going on and why he kept thinking about her. The next day she came to the prince and told him that he had been reading different books for quite some time. She asked me to show her just one. The prince was a little puzzled and asked who had told her that he was reading. Ren told her that she needed to hurry, drink the coffee, or pour it out, as it had a very distinct aroma. Prim said it's a pretty good coffee flavor. The principal thought she was quite fond of drinking coffee after all. The principal thought about bringing her the dessert she was talking about next time, as he really liked the rosy hue appearing on her cheeks. He wanted to capture it in his mind. He really liked that light and faint color. Prim met her new friend, and the latter told her that it would be a good idea to work at the Imperial Palace, as they are very fond of artists there, and if you draw a portrait of one of the members of the imperial family very well, you can get good support from the emperor. And if you draw a portrait badly, you can be heavily penalized. The girl said she was very interested in meeting and seeing someone from the imperial family. She asked if she had ever seen the prince. Prim said she was the 8th prince's teacher. The girl was very frightened and asked if she was all right, as there were many rumors about the prince. Straight up said she's fine, and it's just a rumor that can't be believed. The girl was very happy that the young artist was okay after meeting the prince. The black-haired lady wanted to know a little about the young teacher. She asked what style she painted in. Prim said she lived in another empire, and there are many unusual styles there. She looked at her and asked if she thought she'd been chosen to be a teacher because of her gift. The black-haired beauty hesitated a bit. Prim showed her painting and said she paints in the avant-garde style. The black-haired beauty looked at her and said that she could teach her the style that was peculiar to their empire, so that she wouldn't have any problems with the imperial family in the future. Primabelle said goodbye to her friend and was about to walk back to the castle, but on the way she met the gardener from the palace. He greeted her graciously and introduced himself. The young man said he wasn't listening to her conversation at all, but happened to hear some noise and realized what she was looking for. She walked all over the palace grounds looking for forget-me-nots. He politely handed her a small armful of flowers. She was very happy and thanked him. Prim wanted to go to the prince as soon as possible and show him the flowers. She thanked the gardener again for giving them to her and hurried to the castle. The gardener wanted to say something else to her, but the girl was absorbed in her thoughts and did not hear him. She was hurrying to the prince. Prim brought flowers to the prince. He was very surprised and asked if she had gone for them. Prim said she was leaving to meet her new friend because she had made a friend in the empire. She wanted to spend more time with him, looked at the prince, and said that if he wanted, she could introduce them. The prince said he did not wish to make acquaintance, as one annoying person in the empire was enough for him, and he has no intention of communicating with anyone else. The girl got a little upset. Prim put the flowers on the windowsill and said that since he had no intention of having a conversation with her, she was leaving. She said goodnight to him and hurried to the door. The prince asked her if her friend was a man or a girl. Primabelle said that this girl she looked at him and said with a smile that she was looking for his destiny all his life for him. The young prince saw a red paint stain on her skirt and realized she looked like she was painting. But also he saw the gardener from the window and thought she had been with him all this time. He couldn't why she lied to him and then brought him flowers. He knew that if he could recognize colors, she could paint pictures with him. Thinking of her made his eyes hurt again, and suddenly he saw that the flower had changed its color. He didn't understand the color he was seeing. The prince received a letter from Prim in which she wrote and asked him how he had slept, and also wrote that she had an important business to attend to. He watched and didn't understand why she had begged her to teach the class at first and then just canceled it. Prim knew she needed to prepare in case Elin didn't turn out to be the main character. She needed to continue her search. She entered a boutique frequented by girls from noble families. She thought she could find someone there. As she walked in, she saw many people. She knew that perhaps in a place like this, she would meet another beauty with black hair and scarlet eyes. A young man approached her and apologized for disturbing her, but he needed to open a drawer. He was shocked that there were so many people in the store. Prim asked him what was wrong. He was puzzled and said that everyone had gone crazy after rumors surfaced that all the royal family members were gathering. As the 8th prince's eyes returned to normal, the young man said many people expect to see the prince at the 7th princess's birthday party. The girl was puzzled and didn't understand who had spread such rumors. The man said it was possible because it had not been that long since people had started talking about it. Prim knew that the 6th prince had spread all the rumors. She knew he wanted to put Ren in a difficult position and further ruin his reputation. She knew there was no time to sit back and action had to be taken. She had to tell Ren everything. She ran headlong to the prince. The prince sat at the window and couldn't believe Prim hadn't returned yet. He didn't understand what important business she might have. He knew that before, when he had told her to leave, she had never listened to him, and here she suddenly left. He looked in the mirror and didn't understand why there was an incomprehensible color that kept appearing on his face lately. Prim flew into his room like a thunderclap. He was shocked that she didn't even knock. She panted and asked if he had really gotten an invitation to the birthday reception. The prince was a little puzzled and said that was absurd and he wasn't getting any. Ren said he still couldn't see the color and didn't understand why the emperor could suddenly send him an invitation. Prim looked at him and said they were in bad shape and she could be the first to lose her life. He looked at her puzzled and asked how a birthday reception could have anything to do with her life. She said that the rumors were probably the intrigue of Mr. Diffs, for she had fervently assured him that the prince could see colors. However, if the emperor found out that her words were a brazen lie, they would fire her, or more likely, kill her. The principal looked at her and asked if she was sure she could be kicked out of the palace. Prim looked at him and said with a smile, even if she decided to work, the truth would still prevail. She said that they would both surely prove that the artist who had trained him had not suffered any injuries, and then all outrageous rumors about the prince would disappear, and that would be enough for her. He could see that she was trembling with fear, but assured him that everything was fine. He asked her if they couldn't just tell her that he couldn't see colors yet, but was in the process of learning. The girl was in shock and didn't realize the process he was in. Ren said it was okay to tell everyone that he was seeing scarlet. Either way, he knew it was true, and he was sure then even the emperor himself wouldn't do anything about it. Prim was scared and asked him if he would be okay announcing such a thing in front of everyone. Prince said that if they didn't tell, she might get hurt, and there might be a bit of a fuss after such a statement. Ren looked at her and said that they were going to a reception and they should have practiced dancing. He asked her if she could teach him how to dance. The girl was a little confused. She didn't believe that he was going to go to the reception, but she knew that such an opportunity should not be lost, because thanks to it, she would be able to change the prince's image. Prim agreed to help him. Ren said she talks too much and needs to get down to business. Prim was confused as she realized she didn't know much about dancing at all. She knew the prince was trying very hard and thought he actually wanted to go to the reception, and even though he didn't show it, she still knew the truth. Prim danced with him and didn't get into a rhythm. She knew she couldn't recover, but the dance was very difficult for her. She looked at him and said he was already very good at dancing. They stood so close to each other and held hands. His perfect face made her catch her breath. Ren looked at her and asked with a smile how long she was going to stand on his leg, and added that her dancing skills were terrible. She looked at the prince and said it was all because he was too handsome. The prince was taken aback. Primabelle said that anyone would react similarly if they saw such a beautiful face up close. He asked her with a smile if she blamed him for everything. Prim said that every day all he does is get mad at her, so the realization that now she can look at him and hold his hand makes her happy. She looked at him and said with a smile that she was very good at understanding women's feelings, so she would definitely make his fate fall in love with him without memory. She looked at him and said she had one wish for him. Prim gave him a hard look and asked him not to chase her away today at least. He looked at her and told her that she shouldn't smile because her smile was making his eyes hurt. She leaned over to him, took her face with both hands, and said she would like to take a look. She took a look and said her eyes seemed fine. Smiling, she said she was very pleased to see his face, even more intimately than before. She knew that although she had created him, his face was indeed perfect. He looked and said that if she really liked his face, then let her continue to be around him, as it was too quiet without her, and it was starting to annoy him. Prim was shocked that he said something like that. She knew that little by little he was beginning to open his soul to her. She smiled and said that from now on she would be by his side like a glue, and he would not turn away from her until she found his destiny. The next day she was supposed to meet Alina. She woke up, and for the first time in her life, she felt her body break from the pain. Prim thought it was all the fault of last night's dance. She rejoiced at the fact that she and the prince were slowly beginning to grow closer to each other. Prim knew that if this continued, his eyes would surely return to normal, and everyone would be happy. She knew it was already time to meet the candidate for the main role of the heroine. She was rushing to meet her at full speed. Prim sat waiting for the young girl. The black-haired beauty ran in and told her that she had some very important news to tell Prim. She was overjoyed and said with a smile on her face that she had received an official invitation to the princess's birthday reception. Prim was very glad that the girl had told her. The girl said that she had painted a picture expressing in it the feelings she had felt during their conversation, and her work seemed to please the princess. Prim was very pleased and congratulated the young girl with a smile and asked her what kind of feelings she expressed in her work. The girl said that the princess liked the style of the vanguard. Elin said it was the first time she had ever invited someone to the mansion, and she was very nervous, so she wanted her to show her around the property, and she said she had a lot of things she wanted to do with Prim. Prim agreed and said we could start with a small tour to begin with. They walked around the mansion, and Prim said it was just a gorgeous place that was as good as even a royal palace. Elin said they are much more modest. Suddenly, a young man called out to her. It was the prince. He looked at the girls with disdain and asked what Prim was doing here. Elin said that his arrival was very unexpected and he should announce his visit in advance. The young man was furious and said he had come to meet the Baron. He figured he didn't have to tell him about them personally. Prim was puzzled. By his words, she looked at the girl and realized that Elin was not fond of him. He looked at them and said it turns out they knew each other. Elin said Prim was her friend. He was furiously angry and said that it seemed to be the same artist painting unusual pictures in an obscure style that the Baron was talking about. Prim said that she and Alina have been practicing painting together, and her skills have improved a lot because of her. He looked at them and said he had no idea that Elin was good at drawing. The prince said he wouldn't mind joining them. Prim said she heard he's been into something else lately. The prince was surprised and didn't know what he was talking about. The girl looked at him and said disdainfully that everyone was talking about him being a professional archer. The girl's words made the young prince very angry. She said she would like to see it in action with her own eyes and see how good it is. The young prince said he needed to talk to Elin, and pulling her hand said he needed to leave. Elin was in a lot of pain and asked him to wait. Prim decided to immediately intervene in what was going on. He was shocked and said there was no way she had the right to touch a member of the royal family. Prim said that the girl was in a lot of pain and frantically screamed for him to let her go immediately, but she later said with a snide smirk that he could keep her going unless of course he intended to hurt her. Everyone began to whisper around them. Prim said she has a lot of witnesses around her, and if she wanted to, she would create big rumors about his proclivities. The prince was shocked and said it wasn't like that at all. The girl approached Elin and said that her wrist was injured and needed to be treated as a matter of urgency. Prim told the prince that they needed to leave immediately and asked him if he minded. She knew the Baron would be truly disturbed if he saw a bruise on his daughter's arm. The prince shouted after them, but they were gone. Elin thanked Prim. The prince stood and stared angrily after them. He knew he wouldn't get away with it. He knew he had no choice but to get rid of her and his brother. Prim came to the prince and said that she had finished all her business faster than she had anticipated, so she came early to see him. He looked at her and said she didn't come early, as she thought she would, because the sun had already set. He looked at Ney and said she had said before that the newcomers, and not for this empire. He wanted to know what kind of place she was from. He asked her to tell him about her homeland. She faltered and didn't know what to say to her. She said she came from Radik's empire. She thought if she said something to him now, he'd leave her alone. The prince said it was a very strange name, and it was one he had not heard before. Prim said it's a very small country and it's not easy to find, and in principle, few people are interested in it. She looked at him and wondered if he had studied the entire map. She said he could have just asked her, and he didn't need to memorize the whole map. She said that since they were already talking about her, she asked if he wanted to know anything else. The prince looked at her and wondered if her lips had always been this scarlet. The nanny came to them and brought him a letter. She said the rumors turned out to be true after all. She said the 7th princess allowed him to attend her birthday reception. She approached Prim and said that this was not a good time for a lesson, as she felt that the prince needed time to prepare. He said he would go to the reception with Prim.